So take off all your clothes. I am getting so hot. I'm gonna take my clothes off.
Okay, Carol, I see you. Looks like she's found the new approach to the end of the world that she once knew, and she's finally taken advantage of doing whatever she wants, but the question is, how long will that feeling last? We are back with my deep dive into the 7th episode of Season 1 of Pluribus. In this episode, we see maybe the most determined person on Earth making their way to Carol by any means necessary. As we watch Manousos do his best Tom Hanks impersonation from Castaway, and he even has his own version of Wilson to keep himself going. Now, despite sharing a common interest in fixing the world with Carol, I think Manousos has much more hatred towards the others than Carol, and I have a very interesting theory that I'll be sharing later in this breakdown to explain those reasons why. We've got a lot of road to cover in this episode, so let's break it down, full spoilers ahead. Now, after coming off and learning that the others can't turn her, we find Carol in her cop car headed home with a much different attitude. This new, more relaxed and relieved version of Carol is humming REM's 1987 It's the End of the World as We Know It, which is ironic because her vibe isn't that of what the title suggests of maybe being in a panic, but instead we find her being in the complete opposite mindset as she pulls up to a gas station. Inside, we can visibly see her demeanor is more calm and chill and even more chipper than we ever seen before from Carol as we watch her call the helpline, and this time around, the breakup voicemail doesn't seem to bother her like it did before as she requests for them to activate pump 1 for her gas. Now, not shortly after, we see she calls the helpline again, and while waiting, she does a scratch off, and when the voicemail ends, she requests my personal favorite flavor of Gatorade, which is fruit punch, as she wants it to be the real Gatorade with real sugar, and she wants it to be ice cold temperature as she loads up her car filled with fireworks. Now, in comes the drone with her Gatorade, and as she takes a sip, she notices something isn't right. Now, Carol heads back inside, and she actually wins the scratch off, and she calls the others helpline again, and she tells them that they can do better next time because the Gatorade wasn't ice cold like she requested. It's these little cues and little signs early on this episode that shows us that Carol is now in a completely different headspace and has come to some certain terms with this whole situation after her Vegas trip. Even looking at when the drone brings her this lukewarm Gatorade and she wins the scratch off, you can clearly see she was a bit annoyed and she complains about it, but she's just annoyed. She's not enraged like we've seen her before. It's starting to look like Carol seeing this relationship with the others to be more transactional more than anything. From humming to now singing It's the End of the World as We Know It, this new Carol seems to be taking this world with a new attitude because she feels
End of the world as we know it. And I feel
just fine. Day 12, hour 20, 42 minutes and 53 seconds. Project Save the World seems to be on temporary hold for now because in reality, if she were to save the world, what does that look like for Carol? The one person she wants to bring back is Helen, and we know that she's dead. We know that Carol can't stand her fans that support her, and in general, she's not a people person. So right now it appears that Carol has decided to enjoy the isolation of the world that doesn't want her, and she'll request the occasional help from the others when needed. Carol is now back home, and we watch her celebrating this new path of life with some drinks as she sets off those fireworks she's got, and as she's standing up, she starts singing the Stars and Stripes Forever, but the fun quickly ends when she hears wolves howling. Now, instead of being frightened of them, we see Carol lets out some mild howls of her own, but then that grows to her getting a more primal and out of control howl to show these wolves, who I compared to the hive mind weeks back, that she's now in control. It's time for Carol to let loose and have some fun for once. We now find Carol singing Kenny Loggins' 1980 I'm Alright as she's headed out and she rides past a bison. Now as Carol's leaving the golf course, we see that her cop car has met its end because it won't start for her, as Carol has now decided that it's time for an upgrade and she takes a Rolls Royce covered in just married material. To me, this upgrade represents Carol having this new perspective of her situation, out with the old, in with the new. Now at a hot springs and gift shop, we find Carol in the pool singing Nelly's Hot in Here with her clothes off. Now we watch as the fun continues as Carol goes to Georgia O'Keeffe's museum. We see Carol admires the art, but remembers that she can do whatever she pleases, and she ultimately decides to take one of the pieces home with her. Now here's a fascinating bit about the choice of the piece of art that Carol takes home with her. She chooses Gloria O'Keeffe's Belladonna, which was made in 1939. Now O'Keeffe wasn't just a brilliant painter, she was considered by many as the mother of American modernism. She played an important part of the development of modern art in America, becoming the first female painter to gain respect in New York's art world in the 1920s. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that Carol chose this particular piece of art, because if you all do not know, Georgia consistently battled with critics who dismissed her work as being too feminine or too decorative. People say that her male peers failed to recognize the depth and complexity of her artistic vision. Georgia refused to let the gender norms and social expectations define her art. Now, one could compare her defiance of going against the norm and look at Carol's actions thus far in the story as doing the same thing. This is Carol going against the grain as she returns home and replaces the decorative piece that she once had, which in my eyes represents the old life and her old perspective, with the real one, and this replacing that. Again, out with the old, in with the new. But it's here that I think we see the peak of Carol's acceptance. Carol looks in the fridge, and knowing she's not much of a cook, she decides to call the helpline once again. And this time around, she wants to set up a solo date. She calls the others, and she wants to go to a particular restaurant where her and Helen once celebrated their anniversary. Now cut to this special and expensive place, and again, for the first time this season, we see Carol dressed in the nines, and more importantly, she's eating the food made for her by the others, and she's not throwing away like she did before. Carol decides to play some music on the self-playing piano and goes about enjoying the rest of her evening alone. Now, as the camera pans, I was expecting a special guest in Zosha, but we'll talk about her later. But putting the focus on Carol and this new acceptance, she's fully leaning into the perks, the gourmet meals, the luxury cars, and the curated experience, just like Kumba did in last week's episode. She's accepted this as her new normal, embracing the isolation while using the system to her advantage. Again, it's abundantly clear that Carol has finally opened up to all the perks of being uninfected and tended to by the others, and she's accepted this new way of living. But here's the thing, it's only temporary. Remember what we saw with Kumba last week. Again, the luxury, the fun, it's all a distraction. But eventually, the sheer crashing weight of being one of the last uninfected humans in the world ran by hive mind is going to eventually hit. That glittering new mask can't hide the loneliness forever. She may feel fine singing about the world ending, but deep down she knows this isn't sustainable joy. It's a coping mechanism. The expiration date on this chill phase is definitely looming. But as of now, she's enjoying it all, but across the world, while Carol has accepted this complete isolation with some compromises with the others, we get the extreme version of what she's doing with the one person in the world who's also unaffected and is seeking to meet her to fixing things back to what it used to be. As we cut to Manousos, now days into his journey to meeting Carol, determined to fixing things back to how they used to be as he's walking in the road and he's practicing on his English. Now he hears a vehicle approaching and he unfastens his weapon holster. The others offer him a lift and some water and a recommendation for a spot to observe, a great view, and to rest, but Manousos refuses to take any help from them. The level of commitment and dedication is unmatched by Manousos in this episode. His commitment starts with the basics. We see him siphoning off gas to his car while he's practicing his English alone on long stretches on the road. I found this little detail to be very interesting. After taking the gas from an abandoned truck, we see Manousos leave some money on the windshield. It's like when we saw him leaving the apology letter at his job for the customers about opening the lockers for food. He continues to show us that he believes things will go back to normal and that people will go back to themselves again. Every encounter with the others is met with a cold refusal from him. Even in the small towns where the others greet him, his interactions are seen with this level of hate and visible disdain for them. Now, some of my favorite parts of this episode were the moments of showcasing the beauties of the world, as it's apparent that his English has gotten better and better as he's been on this journey. He continues to refuse to take any help from the others, or even rest in beautiful hotels, or even in someone's house, but instead he sleeps in his car, or even in a church, and he continues to siphon gas and even fishes for his own food. Seeing him fend for himself and being very efficient on his own so far has been a very different experience to watch compared to what we've seen from Carol and her microwave dinners and phone calls to the others with requests. That to me really speaks to both of their individual personalities, their upbringings, and their levels of survival instincts. But the biggest difference I've noticed between them is how early on we saw Carol eventually caving in and accepting some things from the others, but Manousos has made it his life's goal to avoid them and accepting nothing from them at all costs. Seeing where Carol is at this point in the season and what she's experienced so far versus where we find Manousos has been very interesting. Again, unlike Carol, who's had extended interactions with the others and even spent time in intimate settings with them, versus Manousos, who's had zero real contact with any of the uninfected and almost no conversations with the others. He's running a pure, uninterrupted isolation streak, choosing self-reliance at every turn. Again, they seem to have the same goal in mind, but his extreme levels of isolation and his lack of interactions definitely sets up this inevitable meeting with these two characters to be very interesting, especially how we end this episode with Carol. Now back on his journey, which hasn't been stalled by many mishaps, we see he finally comes across a major obstacle. This being a literal fork in the road as he arrives at the Darien Gap, hence the title of this episode. Now this isn't your average detour. It's a roadless expanse between Colombia and Panama. Dense rainforests, mountains, and one of the world's most unforgiving environments. Now, Manousos isn't going to let this stop him as he says goodbye to his car, and the others try to intervene and tell Manousos just how dangerous moving forward can and will be for him. The others warn him about the dangers of the extreme weather, the lack of clean water, deadly plants and animals, but Manousos treats every single warning from them like a lie. Now, as he ignores them and packs up his belongings, and despite his chances of surviving being very low, he's going to push forward. But then the others play the only card they have left with him, and that's Carol. They offer him a fast trip to New Mexico, promising that he'll arrive to her by nightfall. Now, instead of being tempted, he performs one of the episode's most unexpected moments. As he pours gasoline on his own car, declaring that nothing that they have is theirs, and it's all stolen, and they don't belong here. He ends up torching his car, cutting off any possibility of the others owning it, and he steps into the gap alone. Now, watching him torch his own car to ensure that the others don't claim it is very extreme, but it makes me wonder if this was foreshadowing. Him saying to the others that they don't belong here makes me think about Carol questioning if the others would ever give her an atomic bomb if she requested it. Based on everything we've seen so far from him, I wouldn't put it past him if we see that conversation about the atomic bomb being brought up again, and Manousos actually taking action in removing the others in the most extreme and violent way possible. In my eyes, they really set him up to have extreme views and getting rid of the others by any means necessary if it comes to it. Now from here, the episode shifts into raw survival. Days and nights blur together as he repeats his name and says that he's not one of them and he wants to save the world. But the non-stop journey finally takes its toll. In the most tense moment of the episode, we watch as he almost stumbles straight into the chunga palm, which was mentioned earlier by the others as a black palm tree with needle-like bacteria-coated spines. Now, having traveled this far and visibly being tired, we watch as he slips and falls backwards on the tree and lets out an agonizing scream. We proceed to watch him pull himself free, only to have the pain escalating even further. Now, as night falls, in one of the most self-sufficient but brutal scenes so far this season, we watch as he cauterizes the wound on his back with a machete heated on a fire. Now, by morning, we see that he's bleeding heavily and the infection has spread to his face as he passes out and whispers Carol's name as he slowly fades away, but not all hope is lost. Above him, a helicopter approaches as the others are here to rescue him. Man, his level of defiance almost got him killed. He does not want any help, any recommendations at all by the others. But speaking of the others rescuing him might be the biggest mistake that the others have made so far this season. We've seen him turn away every single thing they've offered him, and now assuming that he'll wake up and he'll see that they saved his life, I don't think he's going to take that too kindly. I think about the time we saw Carol's reaction to the others trying to help her after she fell from having too many drinks and how she yelled at them, and we saw how the others reacted and how many deaths followed because of her negative reaction. I can see Manousos acting in a very similar fashion and possibly discovering that he can harm the others by his feelings like Carol. We're going to be discussing more of this topic a little bit later in this breakdown. It's now day 48, hour 16, 57 minutes and 11 seconds from leaving a character that almost died to now going back to Carol, who may be feeling dead inside. We find Carol 36 days from the last time we saw her, as she's now listening to a self-made mixtape, and she's now went from going from the golf course to now playing golf in a parking garage, hitting the balls into nearby buildings. You can see that she's grown bored of the perks of freedom from the start of this episode. You can see it in her eyes. This isn't freedom anymore, it's desolation. It's now nighttime and still lighting her fireworks, but in a much different way this time around. From standing tall and singing and howling at the wolves to now playing music, drinking while sitting down and having a look of being unhappy and bored and again, lonely. Now, one of the fireworks tilts towards her and she sees this and she doesn't move an inch, but instead she turns her chair towards it and welcomes whatever fate comes her way. As it goes off just inches from her face, and her once neighbor's garage is set on fire as Carol watches. Even putting this fire out feels like she's just doing another chore and it's just a meaningless routine. To me, this is Carol at her lowest point without question. Her allowing that firework to possibly kill her was a turning point that she just can't ignore. This isolation isn't freedom, it's death for her. The isolation and loneliness has completely won. She wants the others back. If life is gonna mean anything moving forward, she needs them back in her life. Now, the next morning, look at what Carol is wearing, and that is a pure white shirt. To me, this isn't just a fashion choice, it's a symbol. It's Carol literally waving the white flag. The woman who built walls and ran from connection is done fighting solitude. Now at a home improvement store, Carol grabs some paint and heads home and puts up a message for the others to see. It's clear as time has passed that Carol was once happy with this idea of complete isolation, but that clearly has changed. Also, the fact that she painted what she did versus not calling the others goes a long way because it shows she's truly had a change of heart like the others were looking for. As she's now staring at the painting in her living room from earlier that she took, she hears a car outside and it's Zosha. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but what's interesting about this painting is what the belladonna plant is known for. Belladonna, known as the deadly nightshade or belladonna, is a toxic perennial herbaceous plant in the nightshade family. Now, what's interesting about this is, who is the toxic person in the situation? Is it Carol or is it the others in Zosha? This all ties into my theory that I'm going to be sharing here shortly. Now, Carol slowly walks towards Zosha and walks past the Just Married painting on the car as we see Carol gets emotional because she's missed her as she hugs Zosha, who embraces her, and as the camera pans out, we see the message that Carol left for the others, and it was for them to come back. I would bet this is the longest Carol's ever gone without speaking or seeing another person in her entire life. I also feel like the emotional response from Carol at the end of this episode may have something to do with her feeling a little bit disappointed in herself. I say that because she compared the hive mind to the people at her conversion camp, so I think this is her kind of feeling like she's accepting being a part of the others and slightly accepting conformity. Again, as I spoke to this earlier, all things we saw Carol do in this episode were just distractions she created for herself from acknowledging her loneliness. But like I said earlier, it eventually was going to hit her and she wanted to have some level of connection. In this case, it was wanting them back, and that was in the form of Zosha. Now, of course, the signs of Carol being into Zosha has been there for a very long time. I mean, the fact that she resembled her main character from her books, to the fact that she confessed about being so attracted to her, that was just the nails in the coffin. It's here. The Carol and Zosha era has begun, but the next question is, how long will this last? We've watched Carol cause so much damage in order to avoid the others and even causing millions of lives to be lost, but now she has accepted the others in Zosha, but will this come with a big price? But now going back to where I mentioned I had a theory about Manousos in future episodes, but also tying that into the painting and what it means for Carol. So I mentioned how I believe he's going to learn that his negative emotions could affect the others. I believe he's going to use that against the others, and again, knowing that it's going to hurt them, he's going to take much joy in that considering how he's treated the others so far. But here's the issue. Now that Carol has Zosha back in her life, if he does use their weakness against them, this puts him and Carol at odds because of her feelings towards Zosha. Once he finds out that Carol has befriended or have fallen into some potential romantic relationship with one of the others, their once shared thoughts on returning the world back to normal will be compromised. essentially making Manousos the villain potentially. But the theory that the hive mind will use Carol's eggs that we talked about weeks ago and how important I thought that was going to be seems to be a key element moving forward. Again, I feel like Carol and Zosha will now have a much more intimate relationship after what we saw at the end, but what if Zosha and the others are using Zosha as a way to distract Carol as they use her eggs for the stem cells needed to change her into one of them? If so, assuming that any of this comes to fruition, we could potentially see Carol defending the others at some point, particularly Zosha from Manousos momentarily, only to discover that the others were lying to her about her stem cell situation and Zosha didn't tell her the truth, leaving Carol to maybe joining Manousos and removing the others permanently. So overall, I thought this was a really great episode. I love seeing just how different of a place both Carol and Manousos are at this point in the story. We've seen Carol's journey from avoiding the others to now abandoning her loneliness to welcoming them back into her life, while Manousos has no intention to ever accepting the others in any way possible, putting both characters at odds when they eventually meet. Carol doesn't want to be alone anymore, while Manousos welcomes it. I also love how the title of this episode really highlights the gap between Carol and Manousos again at this point in their stories. I also really enjoyed the cinematic language in this episode and the cinematic experience of watching Manousos' journey because it kind of felt like a mini version of Tom Hanks' Castaway film in the best ways possible. With him continuing to say his name and what he wants to do was like his version of Wilson from Castaway, and it kept him going. So with all that being said, I am very excited and really highly anticipating the cross between Manousos and Carol finally coming to meeting each other because I think it's going to be an explosive moment. With that said, we've come to the end of this week's breakdown of episode 7 of season 1 of Pluribus. So what did you all think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts and theories, predictions for the weeks ahead. What were some of your major takeaways, Easter eggs, some of your deeper meanings about this episode? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I can't thank you enough for the continued support. The special word of the week to let me know that you made it to this point in the video is put in the comments right now, #fireworks. Now, if you all enjoyed this week's breakdown, do me a favor and hit the like button. And when you're watching this on YouTube and hit the like button, there's going to be a hype button. And when you click the hype button, it allows this video to spread to new viewers. Speaking of new viewers, do me a favor and hit that share button. Share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And last but not least, if you all had a good time, consider sticking around where we're obviously covering this show. We're wrapping up It Welcome to Derry season finale this Sunday. We'll be back covering season 5 of Stranger Things when it comes out in a couple weeks. And being a film critic, we will be talking about all the latest and greatest films that are currently in theaters. So if that sounds like something you all will enjoy, again, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. Now, if you all are listening to this week's breakdown via podcast, I appreciate my podcast listeners out there, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Do me a favor, leave your thoughts about this episode in the comments below. What worked, what didn't work, what are your thoughts and theories for the weeks ahead? And also consider sticking around by subscribing and following the podcast and leave me a rating and a review. I would appreciate the support. Alrighty, y'all, until next time, remember that you all are awesome. Stay safe out there. And don't be like Manousos and go into the rainforest by yourself. Don't be like Carol and have a firework pointing directly at your face. Dangerous characters to be taking any advice from. Alrighty, y'all, you all are awesome. And again, I'll see you again soon.